Sequels to long dormant franchises are all the rage, kinda like a virus. So what better time for the Rage virus to make its return? 28 years ago, don't check my math, 28 days later, reinvigorated the shambling corpse of the zombie genre with two simple tricks. What if they weren't slow? And what if they weren't zombies? Though one guy does use that word in 28 years later, and just look at the popcorn meter, clearly pissed a lot of people off. I assume that's why the low score, because otherwise, I feel like I saw a totally different movie from these people. And I lied, Days used a third trick too, being a great movie, the kind that makes you want to use the word film. It also had a sequel. Moving on. That's not fair. 28 Weeks Later wasn't awful, but also didn't hold a candle to the original, and it hardly stood a chance with Boyle and Garland's limited involvement. But now, they're back with Years, and another sequel that's already been shot, plus another they're hoping to make. I loved 28 Years Later. It drops us into a world almost 3 decades into a quarantined apocalypse. Unlike Days, where Jim is just as lost as the audience, this movie offers no one to hold our hand. Instead, we discover the new world on our own. It's a surreal feeling, watching a kid wake up and prepare for a coming-of-age adventure, as if it's the most natural thing, to live on an island across from a mainland teeming with monsters. I love how much tension there is once they reach the mainland, and how the movie is almost episodic in structure. It reflects the way coming-of-age experiences aren't typically singular, and don't hinge on one person. Instead, Years gives us the dad episode, the mom episode, and the Dr. Kelson or competing father figure episode. It's not a new theme for these movies. Jim's first move in 28 Days Later is to look for his parents. Then they meet Frank and Hannah, Frank who becomes a sort of father figure for Jim.
You're having a bad dream, that's all.
Thanks, Dad.
And like 28 Years Later, there are a couple of episodes. The Frank episode, and then a new father figure in the Major Henry West episode.
But don't worry, you're quite safe here.
Years also takes a surprisingly somber and meditative turn toward the end, especially effective because it brings the thriller to a halt. You feel the shift, the same way you feel a car decelerate. You've trudged through death-filled horrors. Now Dr. Kelson will help you reflect on the journey and your relationship with death. It's the opposite trajectory you expect from a horror or thriller, which typically accelerate in the final act. That would be disappointing if that final stretch weren't so effective and moving, but it is both of those things. So the surprising turn is instead a welcome change of pace. But the ending is weird. So what? Weird is good. Weird is different. It's exciting, especially in the hands of capable filmmakers who already have a sequel ready to go. Anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves and instead start at the beginning. Spoilers ahead for 28 Years Later. 28 years ago, the Rage virus laid waste to the UK. Many died, but a few survived, including a young boy named Jimmy. He was watching Teletubbies with a bunch of other kids before the infected showed up. They all die. Jimmy's mom dies. He runs outside to the church where he finds his dad ranting about the day of judgment. He gives Jimmy the cross from around his neck before the boy hides and his father allows himself to be overtaken by the rage-fueled monsters. His salvation. Jimmy runs, fade to black, except for the cross for a moment, then some on-screen text which canonizes, then explains away the ending of 28 Weeks Later. The Rage virus laid waste to the UK. It was driven back from continental Europe. That's the key right there. Remember the end of Weeks where the virus arrived in Paris? Nope, it was driven back. The British mainland was quarantined to contain the virus. Survivors were left to fend for themselves. This opening almost works as its own little short film, a thriller about a kid surviving a rage attack, with dramatic underpinnings, a father who forsakes his son. It sets the thematic lens for this movie, prepare for children to be disappointed by their parents. 28 years later, we meet some of those survivors and find out what nearly 30 years of apocalyptic living does to a society. They live in a fortified community where resources are scarce and everyone has their role. Later on in the classroom, we see a list of those roles. hunter, farmer, forager, and so on. For the 12-year-old Spike, his role will be hunter. And today, his father Jamie will take him to the mainland for his first kill. It's a brilliant setup for the movie. They live on an island connected to the mainland by a tidal causeway, essentially a walkable path. Walkable when in low tide. Otherwise, it's submerged in water and you're stuck on whichever side you're on. It makes for a striking image and soon an amazingly tense sequence. While they head out, Spike's mother Isla will be in the same place she usually is, bed. She's been sick. No one is quite sure what's wrong, but she suffers awful headaches. She's forgetful and often gets confused. Spike is already learning a few lessons from his parents. They won't always be there for you. His mom is still alive but unable to function entirely as a mother, and he gets his first clue that his father is putting on a brave face. When he has to go upstairs to take care of his wife, Spike catches his reflection, stopping with frustration and hesitation before heading up to help her. I mentioned it in the intro, but they do an excellent job immersing you in this new world, which borrows so many elements from the old world, the one even older than ours, like the small set of well-defined jobs and roles in the village. You also have to love the original score by the Young Fathers. It almost makes up for the fact that the 28 Days Later theme, In the House in a Heartbeat by John Murphy, does not return in this film. After seeing how people have changed these last 28 years, now on the mainland, we see how the virus has changed. There are plenty of infected that are just like you remember from Days and Weeks. We call those the fast ones, but in addition, 2 new forms. Alphas, a stronger, smarter, and more aggressive strain who lead hunting packs, rip off heads and spinal cords with their bare hands, Predator style, and Slow-Lows, big, slug-like infected who crawl around eating worms and beetles off the ground. What explains this change? The virus leads to a quite agitated state, which expends a lot of energy. For some, that means ending up on the ground, conserving energy by crawling around and eating whatever they find in the dirt. For others, the opposite. The virus acts like a steroid, dealing with that energy expenditure by building a body capable of wielding it. That in turn enables the traditional fast infected to survive. They seem to be starving out at the end of days, but with the emergence of alphas, they're led in hunting packs and able to feed off animals. As James and Spike make their way to the mainland, the moment that gave me goosebumps and propelled this movie to the ranks of one of my all-time favorites. We hear a reading of the poem Boots by Rudyard Kipling. The poem was first published in 1903 and was meant to capture a British soldier's perspective during the Second Boer War in South Africa. It's meant to capture how war becomes monotonous, exhausting, and dehumanizing.
Flying over Africa, boots, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles a day.
The repetition of the word boots in a repetitive cadence mimics the sound of marching. Soldiers are reduced from individuals into something mechanical, going through a routine, becoming numb to the task before them. The movie uses a reading of the poem recorded in 1915, performed by actor Taylor Holmes. As he reads, his voice turns manic, as though being driven mad by the repetition.
But boots, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Try to think of something different. Oh, my God, keep me from going lunatic. Boots.
On its own, the reading takes you on a journey. You're drained by the end of it. In the context of 28 years later, it does so much. Spike is starting a dangerous journey. He's nervous. Sometimes a movie emphasizes nerves with the sound of a heartbeat. Boots does the same with pulsing repetition, and those nerves are exacerbated by Holmes' manic reading. The movie even cuts to images of the rage infected in the dark, allowing us to see them with a red night vision. This preview of the monsters awaiting Spike is one more anxiety-inducing ingredient. And there's more to unpack. Boots itself is an echo from the past, but in addition, the sequence is intercut with footage from 1944's Henry V, showing medieval war, along with archival footage of British soldiers marching in World War II. What is the movie telling us? Spike is going on a journey that isn't new. Countless soldiers have done the same throughout human and British history. The only difference is that today the enemy are rage-infected people rather than foreign nations. In interviews discussing their thinking behind 28 Years Later and its underlying themes, Boyle and Garland have also talked about the idea of society looking backwards. That seems to be the main idea that drew them into this story. In their interview with Evolution of Horror, Garland talks about how they're exploring the regressive state over the last 10 to 15 years, where there's a real preoccupation related to looking backwards.
How things used to be, trying to make things great again or recover the state of glorious sovereignty or whatever it happens to be.
He described this attitude as looking backwards to recapture something, and he asks, what are the features of that?
And I think the features tend to be cherry-picked memories and amnesia about some things. But crucially, and I think this becomes the most important factor, is misremembering things.
He goes on to tie this attitude directly to the Jamie character.
If you look at the way, say, the father of the little boy reacts to infected, and he talks about how it's okay to kill them, and in fact it's good to kill them, and you need to learn how to do it, and don't worry about killing them because they don't have souls, which is like saying they are subhuman in a sense.
And finally, Danny Boyle brings it back to Henry V when he describes how the community in this movie lives.
They're static, and their sense of richness comes from looking back, and they connect with Henry V, with Agincourt. We beat the French there, we were outnumbered. You can imagine them telling the stories. Way outnumbered, but we band of brothers. We stuck together like we did after the...
Jamie's gung-ho attitude about killing, turning his son into a soldier against the rage-infected horde, it all ties into this idea, glorifying violence against the enemy. Speaking of cherry-picked, in this montage of brave men going to war, the movie includes a shot from 28 Weeks Later, with soldiers firing on the infected. What's hard to tell from this cherry-picked image is that they're also firing on uninfected civilians. And 28 Weeks Later, when the infection returns, they stop differentiating and just start shooting everyone. I love how this is cut in a way where it almost looks like the knights with bows and arrows are the ones firing on the civilians in 28 Weeks Later. It's visual poetry that draws a line from the distant past all the way through to the present. The weapons, technology, and enemies may change, but the ideas remain. The movie is obviously critical of Jamie's bloodthirst for the infected, something that becomes clearer toward the end of the movie, but it also recognizes the utility in it. Embracing the hunt has forged Jamie and others into warriors capable of defending their community and surviving. It's similar to 28 Days Later, which also looks at two sides of the same coin. It highlights the dangers of societal rage, while also recognizing the utility of rage. Jim embraces rage to kill anyone between him and his new family. That's how he rescues Selena and Hannah. We'll say more about this later. Not far off the causeway, Spike gets his first kill, a slow-lo. They're surprised by a second one, which Jamie takes care of. Then they see something strange, another slow-lo, but this one is a child. Jamie lets that one live, and it scampers off. One of the worst things a sequel can do is just show you more of the same. So how do you make the rage-infected, who we met 28 years ago, frightening again? On the one hand, you introduce the alphas, a more dangerous breed, scary in their strength and intelligence. On the other hand, the first rage-infected we meet in the movie are slow-los, which are grotesque in a way we haven't seen before. They are, to put it bluntly, disgusting, like slugs, which is what Garland called them in the original screenplay before they were changed to slow-los. Also, seeing one as a child is off-putting and raises uncomfortable questions. Where the hell did it come from? Are these things breeding now? Spoilers, yes. There's a strange moment here too. Jamie points his arrow at the child, then lets it go. And at that moment, you hear the sound of children yelling. One shouts, "Get in here," and the other, "Hey!" It reminds me of this moment in 28 Days Later when Jim is forced to kill a rage-infected kid. While it growls at him, you actually hear it shout, "I hate you." This was confirmed as an audio mixing error. They had people shouting all sorts of things for the sound of the rage-infected, but nothing coherent was supposed to come through. I doubt they made the same mistake twice, so I wonder if they included the sound in years to subtly humanize the infected. That's already done to an extent, because unlike every rage-infected we've ever met, this child runs away. It must be feeling something other than unending rage. Was it afraid? Or maybe unsure what to do without its parents around? Now, I don't think the rage-infected are actually speaking, but in this sequence, given the poem and the interspliced war footage, Boyle is already playing so much with the sound and visual design where not everything is literal, so I think they decided to drop in the sound of children, probably taken from some of what they filmed at the Village, to subconsciously raise the idea of human children while you're looking at the Slolo kid. I'm sure everyone knows by now too that this movie was largely shot on iPhones, though it's one of those things where the iPhones have so many attachments and lenses. It's like you shot it on an iPhone, yes, but there are some pretty big caveats. Like Days that was shot on small digital cameras, this was partly a logistical choice. They sometimes needed easily maneuverable cameras, but it also lends a similar found footage feel like the original. Then, of course, everyone has seen the picture of the sort of half-disc thing covered in iPhones, allowing for a budget version of bullet time. It gives the movie a unique, and let's be honest, cool look. If you want the artsy justification, it's similar to any time you do something unexpected with the camera. It draws the viewer's attention. As Boyle put it to IGN, as it's a horror movie, we use it for the violent scenes to emphasize their impact. For a moment, the audience is inside the scene, the action, rather than classically observing a picture. Spike's education for the day is not yet done. They continue further into the mainland. Inside a cottage, they scavenge but find little. Just a man, infected, hanging upside down, spitting up blood in a bag. He's been tied up and left for the infected as either punishment or a warning, or maybe both. The name Jimmy has been carved into his flesh. Our first hint that the boy we meet in the movie's opening, Jimmy, has become someone not to be trifled with, a post-apocalyptic leader of some kind. Spike wants to look away, but his father won't allow that, because there's a lesson here. While the man thrashes, Jamie orders his son to take his second kill. Spike hesitates until it thrashes so much it falls from the ceiling. Then finally, he sends an arrow through its skull. The lesson? At first, Jamie tells him there are strange people on the mainland, roaming. That's why our home is so precious. Spike asks if that's the lesson, and Jamie says no. Then, as if in answer, he tells Spike, kill it. The more you kill, the easier it gets. This is an interesting change from Garland's script. On the page, there are a couple of differences. They don't find a body in a cottage, they find it hanging from a tree. And Spike doesn't have to kill the man because in the script, he's already dead. But Jamie still uses it for a lesson, telling Spike, sometimes people do evil just because they can. There's strange folks out here, particularly the ones that roam. Is that the lesson? Spike asks. Jamie answers, the lesson is, however bad the infected are, people can be worse. In a way, that's the same answer he gives in the filmed version. The more you kill, the easier it gets. But the filmed version implicates him a bit more. He isn't Jimmy, he doesn't torture people and leave them for dead, but he has cultivated his ruthless side. He is a step in the direction of Jimmy, someone who romanticizes the kill.
Beautiful kill, Spike.
You feel good?
I think so.
You should.
I'm proud of you.
Soon, Jamie and Spike find the remains of a deer.
Intestines. I really like it.
Another small example of that reverence for violence. I weirdly like the smell of fresh intestines ripped out of an animal. There's also an interesting parallel here with 28 Days Later. Right after Jamie makes Spike kill the upside-down infected guy, we hear the hymn Abide With Me, and cut to the other kids in the community learning in a traditional classroom setting. It happens at the 25-minute mark. At almost the exact same point in 28 Days Later, at the 24-minute mark, the same hymn is played. It happens when Jim finds his parents dead. It's meant to be mournful, not just for his parents, but on the commentary track. Boyle said they chose to use a couple of hymns in the movie so the audience would think about
the history or the culture of the past in Britain, really, what had gone. We thought these haunting songs, these hymns would be a nice way of doing it.
In a way, both movies use the same hymn at the same time, but for opposite reasons. In Days, to mourn the loss of culture and history. In Years, to mourn their return. Specifically what Boyle and Garland see as the cherry-picked version of the past, romanticizing war and violence. The deer carcass, Jamie points out, is not the work of slow-lows. There must be fast ones around, and the head of that deer ripped out with its spinal cord means there's an alpha too. That's when Jamie decides they are going back. But across the field, they spot a pack and the alpha. Change of plans. Retreat into the forest. They run with that pack right behind them. What do you call a pack of the infected? The screenplay actually provides a word. In the opening pages, when describing Jimmy's infected father, the vicar, Garland writes, as the infected vicar runs, the other infected start to follow. The collective noun of infected, a congregation. Jamie kills many of them. Spike, on the other hand, is scared, so his arrows mostly miss their targets. They keep running and killing back to a cottage where they hide. With the alpha waiting for them out there, they have no other choice but to wait themselves. They definitely won't fight it. Jamie's seen it take a dozen hits to take one of them down. As the sun goes down, they spot a fire in the distance. Spike asks what it is, and Jamie says he doesn't know, but it's obvious he's hiding something. I find it really easy to like the Jamie character. In part, that's Aaron Taylor Johnson's charm. In part, it's how badass he is in killing the rage infected, or congregations, and you expect him to be a militant father with no time for feelings. But he is sometimes warm and caring. That morning, he tries to give Spike all the bacon and lies, claiming he already had some, so his son wouldn't feel bad hogging it all. And once they've taken refuge in the cottage, Spike blames himself for missing so much. Jamie is quick to reassure him.
What are you talking about? This is not your fault. And you kept shooting. I've seen adults who kind of get an arrow on the boy, they're shaking so hard. Not you. Hey, Spike, you did well. Honestly.
Though it's a double-edged sword, because it also speaks to perhaps too much importance placed on the appearance of strength. That's a lot of the motivation for Spike being out here to begin with.
Can't go back now, Dad.
Why?
Everyone will think I'm soft.
Oh, they will.
We also have to talk about the alphas. They are terrifying, especially in silhouette, where you see just how big they are in comparison to normal infected. And after building up Jamie so much, to see him rattled by one tells you everything you need to know about them. That night, Spike has a dream of his mother drowning while his father skips rocks. Nightmares are a 28 franchise staple since Jim's nightmare in Days, when he found himself alone, abandoned by his new friends. To me, Spike's dream represents his twofold fear. One, that his mother is not just unwell, but dying. And two, that his father doesn't seem to care. That's why instead of saving his mom in the nightmare, he's not even paying attention to her, just skipping rocks on the water. The nightmare ends when a stampede of deer finishes the job that 28 years of wear and tear started. The cottage collapses. Jamie and Spike are forced to run out into the open where the alpha awaits. It isn't low tide, but it'll have to be low enough. They run across the causeway, and the alpha follows close behind. It closes in, until finally, arrows from the watchtower. Jamie and Spike get on the right side of that gate and celebrate. And that may be one of my favorite sequences ever. First off, The whole idea of the causeway is awesome. It makes for a great visual, having the characters march across water to the mainland. It builds in a ticking time bomb. If we don't get back during low tide, we're stuck. And now when Jamie and Spike are forced to run before low tide, it means they're trudging through water. They're slow. As they make their way across, it's so tense, and there's a moment of relief, because they get pretty far on the causeway, and you figure, surely they've gotten far enough. Until you hear the thing and see it running. The scene is beautiful. It's a night shot and with no light pollution. The night sky looks otherworldly. Because it's dark, it should be hard to keep track of where they are, but the splashing water makes it clear. And you can clearly see the bigger splash will overtake the smaller one. And they have no choice but to run in a straight line in this wide open space with nowhere to hide. A masterclass in suspense combined with incredible visual composition. Back in the village, Jamie has the time of his life telling everyone how brave his son was and all the killing he did. But it's all lies, or at best exaggeration. It doesn't sit well with Spike. And it doesn't sit well with him when he sees his father outside with Rosie. Why is he with someone who isn't Spike's mother? Does he not love her anymore? Does he not care that she's sick? Has he even tried to make her better? Or is he just waiting for her to die? While Jamie parties, Spike heads home where he finds Sam, Jamie's friend who helps out at home. Sam lets slip something he shouldn't. That fire they saw is likely the work of Dr. Ian Kelson. Spike can't believe it. Another lie. His dad said all the doctors were dead. That's why they don't know what's wrong with Mom. The next morning, Spike confronts him about it, and Jamie admits the truth. Yes, there is a Dr. Kelson, and that was his fire, but he's no good now because he's gone insane. Jamie knows because he saw it firsthand. Him and a group were foraging years ago, before Spike was born, and they saw Dr. Kelson with hundreds of corpses arranged in neat rows on the ground, and a big fire in the middle where he was burning them. When Kelson spotted the group, he casually waved for them to come down and join him, as though he weren't doing something so strange and grotesque. Jamie and his group ran away, and in 15 years, never looked back. Then Spike confronts Jamie about Isla, his mother. Does he want her to die so he can be with Rosie? Jamie tells the boy to watch his mouth, and when he doesn't, Jamie hits him. That's when Spike finally tells him to leave. Spike pulls out a knife and tells his father to get away from them. I feel so conflicted about this. On one hand, Jamie's story feels so dumb. If I put myself in Jamie's shoes, living in a world ravaged by infection, and I find out a doctor is methodically burning bodies, my first thought would be, this probably has something to do with stopping the spread. I definitely wouldn't be like, oh my God, he's crazy, run, and then never go back. Especially when a doctor would be incredibly useful to your community. Look, Jamie has obviously seen some stuff. He was pretty unfazed when he found the infected guy hanging upside down, carved with the name Jimmy. So he's definitely seen brutality like it before, at the hands of strange people on the mainland. That probably impacted the way he saw Kelson. But in 15 years, to never send a scout, or do any kind of observation to see if maybe that doctor could be of use, I have a really hard time buying it. On the other hand, thematically, it does accomplish something. Jamie represents the regressive approach, cherry-picking, romanticizing the past. That's the approach which blinds you. It causes ignorance and close-mindedness. So Jamie can't see Kelson as anything other than a lunatic, just like he can't see the infected as anything other than monsters, versus Kelson's more compassionate view, which we'll get to know later. I also enjoy the unconventional path the movie takes. If you want Spike on his own for an apocalyptic coming-of-age story, the easy choice would be to kill the father. Instead, they kill the image of the father. That's more interesting and has the potential to make for a very interesting confrontation in the second or third movie once Spike has grown some more. This is when the movie effectively enters another chapter. The first was about Spike and his father, the next, Spike and his mother. He decides to take her across the causeway himself and bring her to Dr. Kelson. He lights a fire as a distraction, so the watchtower is briefly abandoned, and in that brief window, he leaves with his mother. At night, they take shelter. Spike promises to keep watch, but he is still a kid. Kids get sleepy. Even when a Slolo mistakes his shoelace for a worm, it doesn't wake him up. Even when that Slolo spits out the shoelace and notices Spike's warm body, it doesn't wake him up. But in the morning, he's okay, and the Slolo is dead. What happened? His mother saw it and killed it, violently smashing in its head. She just doesn't remember. Part of whatever ailment has been affecting her mind. This is her Jim moment, highlighting the rage and violence inside all of us. Even this motherly figure who is sick and mostly unable to take care of herself. The instinct, the rage is still there, even when she herself isn't entirely conscious. The screenplay makes it even more explicit. Cut to Isla's face. We can see the same madness that we see in the faces of the infected, teeth bared and gritted, eyes wide, as if in horror at herself. She also talks to Spike about the way her father was with her.
Is your dad silly?
Dad?
Yeah. Silly with you, jokey. Your granddad was so silly.
Is Jamie ever like that?
Is your dad like that? You know, when it's just the two of you?
No.
I think Jamie has a potential defamation suit on his hands with how much this movie constantly badmouths him. Yes, this is another example of turning him into the personification of aggression. Not only does he cherry-pick the past, but also fatherhood, only showing Spike his tougher, militant side. That might be frustrating to hear, because you could easily say, lay off. They're in a gosh darn apocalypse. Maybe it's good to be a little tough. And I think that's fair, but even still, it's part of highlighting the cost of that attitude. Even if it's a necessary price to pay, there is still a price worth recognizing. Becoming a bloodthirsty warrior isn't free. If you were to apply some of these ideas to the real world, I think Garland and Boyle would like us to recognize where we're too focused on the past. And if we see ourselves in 28 years later, we can ask, should we as a society live as if we're in a rage apocalypse? If circumstance has pushed Jamie, Isla, and Spike's community into the past, it helps us recognize the luxury of the future. In our world, we get to be progressive if we want. We don't have to be regressive, even if, for Jamie, that's sometimes the right choice. The next day, they continue on their journey. Nearby, some Swedish soldiers have a problem. While patrolling the east coast of Scotland, they hit something and their boat sank. A few of them found a life raft, and the wind blew them to shore. Now they're fighting for their lives. The guns help, but the rage-infected are fast, and all it takes is one bite for soldiers to join their ranks. And then there are the Alphas. Before long, most of the soldiers are dead. Elsewhere, some infected bathe themselves in water. I think they're kind of splashing around, clearly another indication of at least animalistic intelligence, enough to justify how they've survived as a species these last 28 years. Along the same lines, one of those infected is pregnant. In some fields, Isla and Spike walk, a walk she enjoys despite, or maybe thanks to her confusion. She mistakes Spike for her father, and the walk becomes a nostalgia trip, until her nose bleeds and she returns to lucidity, in time to watch her son put down an emaciated, infected Jim. No, that wasn't really Jim, but when the trailers came out, a lot of people thought this guy was Jim. Cillian Murphy does not appear in this movie, but Danny Boyle has been surprisingly forthcoming about how much, or if at all, Cillian Murphy will be in the second and third movies. But for the spoiler-averse, I'll save those details for the end of the video, and I'll give a warning first. When more infected arrive, this time fast ones, Spike and his mom run. They get inside a petrol station where they can hardly breathe, thanks to a cloud of benzene vaporized after decades of neglect. The infected come in after them. They're only saved when the sole surviving Swedish soldier fires into the gas cloud. The resulting explosion kills the infected, while Spike and Isla hit the deck. Similar to 28 Days Later, when Mark and Selena blow up a gas station but survive along with Jim by hiding in the wall space between windows. Outside, the soldier introduces himself as Eric. He makes for a fun character as a fish out of water who feels like he came from the future to a place trapped in a pre-technological past. He has to explain what a delivery driver is.
You know, people order stuff online. But you don't know what online is.
He has to explain what a smartphone is.
Take a look at that. It's my fiance. Or ex, I guess.
What's wrong with her face?
These moments make for nice levity after a lot of tension, and before things are about to take a dramatic and somber tone. My favorite moment? Eric carries Isla for a while until...
Mom.
She can walk?
Eric is a fun character, but also touches on another theme: how easy it is for the world to keep turning, ignoring a tragedy going on somewhere else. Days touches on this when we realize they're quarantined. It takes a second because Jim is out of it, so the guy ranting and raving in the background is drowned out.
Smithers says women and seamen don't mix.
But if you turn on the subtitles, you actually see he's quoting Simpsons. Here's what he says. Smithers says, women and seamen don't mix. And Mr. Burns says, we all know what you think, Smithers. And that was my favorite joke in The Simpsons. That's what they're doing a few hundred miles away, across the channel, across the Atlantic. Eating dinner and watching the
fucking Simpsons.
I think women and seamen don't mix.
We knew what you think.
28 years later, we meet Eric with a smartphone and make the idea real. As they continue on, they hear screaming. Isla follows it to an old train car where she finds that pregnant, infected woman in the midst of giving birth. She's suffering, so Isla offers her hands. The infected woman takes them. For a moment, the two women, both sick in different ways, hold each other's hands. They hold hands until the baby is born. This moment is an answer to a couple of earlier ones. Jim raging out on the soldiers in 28 Days Later. Isla raging out on the slow-lo in this movie. Those moments showed us that though it's not our 24/7 operating system, there is rage inside us. This moment shows that while rage is the infected's 24/7 operating system, there is humanity in them. Through the magic of the placenta and its ability to filter out pathogens and toxins, the baby is born without infection. But wait, what about the young infected we see earlier in the movie? My guess is that when these babies are born, they eventually do get the infection through breastfeeding, for instance. The baby is born. Isla asks Spike to cut the umbilical cord. They clean it off with water, and soon the mother returns to her state of rage. But before she can attack, Eric puts her down. Then he demands Isla leave the baby.
It's a baby! It's a fucking zombie baby!
And there it is. This franchise's first use of the Z word.
Don't say that. What? That. The Z word. Don't say it.
It's funny, there's an interview where journalist Jake Hamilton asks Boyle and Garland if this is the first time in the franchise where they use the word zombie. And look how confused Garland gets.
Do they use the... I did. I'm not just... You could easily be right. I'm sure you are right. Where do they say it? Did somebody say it?
I assume he's confused because if you search, that word does not appear in his written screenplay, at least the one they've published, which you can purchase. So I'm guessing it was improvised on set. Boyle and Garland can't seem to remember when or how the line was decided. Then Garland goes on a tangent about how he does not object to the word, because although they aren't supernatural in this movie, clearly it's a movie in the zombie genre.
I always thought, yeah, it's a zombie movie. I mean, it's from that genre. It's in that lineage. It's aware of the George Romero stuff and all the other films. And it was just a twist on it.
Glad we can finally put that to rest, which is what Eric hopes to do to the baby. He demands Isla put it on the ground so he can shoot it. And that's when the Alpha grabs him and rips his head off. He was likely drawn by the sound of his gunfire. Spike and Isla run. Like the Causeway chase, this one is extra tense, thanks to the doors between train cars slowing them down. Luckily, that also slows down the Alpha, whose large size is actually an impediment in the cramped carriages. though you get the sense he's extra motivated to catch up, since the humans have stolen his progeny. He also pauses for a moment to lift the dead woman, then returns to his rage state, seemingly enraged they've killed someone he might recognize as a mate. In terms of intelligence, he doesn't crash through the train doors. We actually see him slide them open. He also stops chasing them once he realizes he's better off waiting for them to get off the train, where out in the open he'll once again have a speed advantage. They leap off the train, he chases them, and they're as good as dead, until Dr. Kelson hits the Alpha with a blow dart, a combination of morphine and xylazine. Crazy Dr. Kelson is orange from head to toe. He's covered himself in iodine to hopefully keep out the virus. While the Alpha stands in a daze, Kelson introduces him as Samson. That's what he calls the Alpha, who has lived in the area for 3 years. Why hasn't he just killed the Alpha? How stupid is he? It's called compassion. You who so love to point out, they aren't zombies, they're rage-infected humans. You of all people should understand. Yeah, they're humans, they're people. Kelson represents the alternative to Jamie's regressive view. He represents compassion. I'd argue that neither view is perfect. Both have their blind spots. Like how many non-infected have died by Samson's hands thanks to Kelson keeping him alive? The right answer, like so many things, is probably somewhere in between. Compassion balanced with pragmatic ruthlessness. Ralph Fiennes plays this character so well. Compassion, wisdom, with a touch of awkwardness, expected after years of little to no social contact, like the little spark of joy when he introduces Spike to his bone temple.
What's that?
I've been waiting almost 13 years for someone to ask that question.
Dr. Kelson answers Spike's question with a question. Do you know the words memento mori, Latin for remember death? Remember, you must die. They cross the rope bridge, which helps keep the infected out, and he gives them a tour of his bone temple. That's what Jamie saw 15 years ago. He was burning bodies down to the bone so he could build a monument in their honor.
Infected and non-infected alike? Because they are alike?
It really is awe-inspiring to see. A pile of bones and skulls is something you'd only expect in a horror movie, which I guess this is. But you don't expect it to be a beautiful monument, something your eyes are drawn to rather than repelled in disgust. It's especially intoxicating thanks to the lush green of uncontrolled nature around it. If you're like me and you watch a lot of horror movies, including a lot of zombie movies, you've seen a lot of people die. It gets to a point where you're totally desensitized to it. Actually, that's true of all kinds of movies. Garland points out in his interview with Script Apart, it's true of superhero movies. He talks about how every time a building falls, there are probably a lot of people dying. Man of Steel. Thinking about the island and 28 years later.
What has happened on this island is just an enormous amount of death. And who's looking at that? Who's looking at it fairly? So there's this character who is concerned with that thing.
This whole sequence is about bringing not just the movie to a standstill, but in a way, the whole genre. Let's take pause and reckon with death for a few minutes.
A sort of compassionate thing. And then, and this is going to sound a bit odd and probably pretentious, that's exactly true of any place. It's true of London and Britain and Europe and the world.
It's easy to get used to the noise of 24/7 news coverage on wars, atrocities, and any other sources of constant death. This sequence is an attempt, I think, to turn statistics back into tragedies, to remind us that a skull isn't just a Halloween decoration or horror movie prop.
Every skull is a set of thoughts. These sockets saw, and these jaws spoke and swallowed. This is a monument to them, a temple.
Kelson oozes compassion, even the way he reassures Spike before he even has a chance to feel bad for knocking over some of the skulls.
Don't worry, no, it's not precious in that way.
Dr. Kelson melts off the remains of Eric's flesh, and they find him a spot in the temple. That night, he assesses Isla. He can't know for certain, but he's certain enough. She has cancer. It's in her brain. Either it started there or spread there from her body. In any case, there will be no surviving it. Isla had a feeling this was the case. She admits she should have told Spike, but she was too scared. She needed someone else to tell him, but no one did. Can we lay off Jamie for 2 minutes? Spike doesn't want to believe it. Can they not find her medicine? Something? No, nothing can cure her. She will die soon. Until then, it hurts, and her mind is going. She'd rather go a better way. Kelson and Isla know Spike won't accept it, at least not yet, so he hits him with one of the blow darts. As Spike is subdued, Kelson reminds him what memento mori means. We all must die. And it's true, but there are better ways than others. The best is a peaceful one, where we leave each other in love.
Memento amoris. Remember you must love.
Then Kelson and Isla walk off. Soon he returns with her clean skull in his hand. Come sunrise, Spike climbs to the top of the bone tower and finds his mother the perfect resting place, a perch from where she can watch the rising sun. How can anyone not like this movie? It obviously subverts expectations in a couple of ways. Instead of rising action in the third act, things slow way down. And instead of a Kurtz-like figure from Heart of Darkness or its film adaptation Apocalypse Now, Spike finds his inverse. Subverting expectations is obviously not a guarantee of quality, but when it's in service of great storytelling, then I'd say it's more often than not a step in the direction of something special. We watch movies to feel something, and it's easy to get burnt out on watching the same thing over and over. So if you can achieve the element of surprise in a way that's organic to the story, I'll always appreciate that. That's partly why 28 Years Later for me easily rivals 28 Days Later. Quick note, I'm glad they kept Isla's death off screen. Garland's screenplay actually had us watch Kelson behead her with a machete. Exterior, the Bone Temple, night. Isla, she is standing in the Bone Temple, chin raised, looking up at the stars, smiling slightly. Half a beat later, she is decapitated. She drops, revealing Dr. Kelson behind her with a machete. Alright, enough of this lame, sentimental crap. Do you hear the thumping of those footsteps? The Alpha is on his way. Spike and Kelson hide underground until Samson puts his fist through the hatch. He grabs Kelson until Spike sticks him with a needle and subdues him again. Kelson suggests that perhaps it's time for Spike and the baby to go home. As long as the baby is there, the Alpha will keep coming back to try and get it. And I'm not sure how long Kelson can defend himself on compassion alone, plus a little morphine and xylazine. Spike journeys off with the baby in a basket and heads across the causeway. He leaves that baby at the gate, along with a note to his father. Dad, I'm okay. You don't need to look for me. I'll come back when I'm ready. I want to keep walking until I can't see the sea. We found Dr. Kelson. He's not insane. He's a kind man. The baby's from an infected, but she's not. She's okay. Please be kind to her. Her name is Isla. There's an edit here that's a little strange. It says 28 days later to tell us Spike survives on his own outside the walls for about a month. We see him catching and cooking fish. The weird thing is the 28 days later card comes up before he drops the baby off, when of course there's no way the baby could survive a month without milk or a substitute. So really, I think he drops the baby off, then 28 days pass. And actually, that's how it's presented in the screenplay. And although the edit is a bit strange in the movie, I think what we're meant to interpret is that after the title card, what we're seeing is a montage of what happens over the course of 28 days, rather than a clean time skip. Anyway, in that note to his father, Spike is pretty dismissive. He certainly did a lot of growing up in the movie, but I think he's overestimated just how grown up he is, and I think he'll be in for a rude awakening in the next movie. I think he won't get to be so picky over which dad he gets. He'll be crying for Jamie. When Jamie gets the note, he sprints out the gate screaming for Spike, but it's high tide, so he can't get very far. After 28 days, Spike is followed. He can hear the sound of people around him moving quickly and making strange noises. They are not the sounds of the infected, but the infected are there too. Spike kills who he can until he's cornered. That's when they step in to save him. The Jimmies. The boy from the opening, now grown up and leading some sort of roaming gang. Each member wears a different colored tracksuit, matching the colors of the Teletubbies. They easily slaughter the coming infected, and they do it with style. Finally, time for introductions.
Hello, my name's Jimmy.
He shakes the boy's hand.
That's me pals.
The upside down cross is a really clever way to remind you who this character is if you don't remember. It has been almost 2 hours since you met him, but you're likely to remember that cross thanks to the way it was highlighted early on. Jack O'Connell, by the way, is perfect casting. In this and in Sinners, he is so good at the charismatic menace. And he's a great preview of what's to come. In an interview with IndieWire, Boyle said that where 28 Years Later is about the nature of family, its sequel, that heavily focuses on the Jimmies, is about the nature of evil. That has me so excited for the next movie, titled 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. It isn't directed by Boyle because they had to shoot the movies back to back for financial and actor reasons, and he couldn't do it. Instead, it's directed by Nia DaCosta, though Garland did write the sequel, and I have high hopes. As the conclusion to Spike's story in this movie, though, I think the Jimmies represent a few things. Primarily, they are the next stage in his growing up. He learned a few lessons in this movie about death and about the flaws in people. Both his parents lied to him. His mother because she was scared and didn't know how to tell her son she's probably dying. His dad lied, I think out of guilt. He obviously didn't want his son to know about the affair and didn't want him to know about the doctor, because that would make it obvious he had not explored every possible avenue to help Isla. There was also an element of fear. He feared what he didn't understand when he saw Kelson preparing to build his bone temple 15 years ago. But flaws in people trying their best are one thing. Evil is something else. We don't know much about the Jimmies yet, but we saw their handiwork, carving up a man and leaving him for the infected. We see some graffiti. Someone has written, "Behold, he is coming with clouds," and the gang has added Jimmy to that sentence, painting him as an almost cult-like figure. When the Jimmies arrive, they are a chaotic presence, with gratuitous acrobatics and over-the-top methods for dispatching the infected. That is uncomfortable in this apocalyptic landscape, where Spike has learned to survive with more traditional, quiet tactics, and where noise draws the infected. One thing Spike has virtually no exposure to is pop culture. He didn't even know what a frisbee was earlier in the movie, so a gang shaping themselves after pop culture from before the rage virus hit makes them an even stranger presence to Spike. In addition to the Teletubbies, Jimmy primarily bases his look off Jimmy Savile, a huge figure in British pop culture history. Savile hosted BBC's Top of the Pops in the 60s, a weekly music show, and Jim'll Fix It from the 70s into the 90s, where he granted wishes for kids who wrote in. He died in 2011, and the following year, investigations revealed that his celebrity status covered up the truth, that he was a monster, a predator and abuser with hundreds of victims, including children. Jimmy, and 28 Years Later, adopting Savile's look is one more example of cherry-picking the past. In their interview with Business Insider, speaking on the topic, Boyle said, "It's all kind of twisting in this partial remembrance, clinging on to things and then recreating them as an image for followers." In the world of 28 Years Later, that cherry-picking might not be entirely intentional, as the rage virus would have hit in the early 2000s, likely preventing Savile's full story from coming out as it did for us in 2012. Finally, there's an interesting comparison to be drawn between Spike and Jimmy. Both had their own traumatic upbringings. Jimmy lost his family to the infected, Spike lost his mother to cancer, and his father, though still alive, has in a way forsaken him, as Jimmy's father did him. However, it seems like Spike is on a better path, in part thanks to the wisdom and mentorship of Dr. Kelson. Perhaps that's what Jimmy lacked that led him to become who he is now. If the next movie really is about the nature of evil, maybe it'll have more to say on this topic, the who and why of the Jimmys. Speaking of Jimmys, let's talk about another Jimmy, Jim, Cillian Murphy. So to what extent will he be present in the next two movies? Turn the video off now if you don't want to know. Okay, Boyle has basically said Jim will show up at the end of the Bone Temple, similar to the way Jimmy only showed up at the end of 28 Years Later. But just like that sets up a much larger role for Jimmy in the Bone Temple, Jim's appearance at the end of Bone Temple would set up a much larger presence in the third movie. So, Jim cameo at the end of the second movie, hopefully that one performs well enough, the third movie is greenlit, and he'd have a much bigger role there. Anyway, I'm sure I'll have more to say when 28 Years Later 2 comes out, so stay subscribed, and I'll see you in a few months at the Bone Temple. Month of Terror continues tomorrow with The Black Phone.